Chapter 10 Teamwork. The next few days passed fast, and soon enough, I found myself entrapped in a building again, just with my team this time. Waiting for a signal to begin, we had already removed our blindfolds and were in the midst of our pre-game processes. Caitlin was pacing back and forth, Shane was amping himself up, and Macy was clasping her hands so tight you'd think she just had won. I, meanwhile, brushed my hair out of my face and adjusted the green uniform I wore, which said Team 11. "Are we ready?" I asked them, and though everyone was jittery, I got 3 nods in response. And truthfully, I had faith we were prepared. There were huge stakes on today, but I trusted that my team was up for the challenge, and that our talk had really helped at the plaza. "Okay, then at any moment now," I said, and as if on command, the door clattered open. We bolted forward, then were met with a lectern to read aloud.
"Dear contestants, welcome to the lab. Today, you must solve an escape room in your pre-made teams of 4. When you reach the end of the hall, your timer will begin, and it will only stop for one of 2 things. Either you light the beacon at the end of the game, or your time falls out of the top 10. As each team competes in numerical order, later teams may still knock out your time, so make sure to hurry as much as possible, and don't be complacent. Any instance of cheating will result in instant disqualification, so be creative and get lucky, but do not break the game or share any answers. With that addressed, fair play and good luck."
Hey. I slicked my hair back as I stretched and looked at the other 3. "Well, you heard it here, guys. It's game on," I said, and the others all nodded. We walked together down the hall and saw a lever waiting. "Alright, we just have to pull this lever and go," I said, and Shane took a chance to yank it down and begin our time. But, assuming that some door would reveal proved to be our first mistake, as a soft whirring noise rang out and the floor began to drop. Suddenly, we plunged downwards, and I realized that we had to be in the octagon. Chief Lab of Zaramira, the building was headed by the famous Dr. Baston Brick, but its inside was secretive, at least until today. My dad, a smaller scientist himself, had been here a few times, but even the rumors he told me did little to prepare for the surprise. As the layout of the floor came into view, my eyes were instantly drawn to the sleek walls and vast tunnels, which took the shape of, well, an octagon. In the center, our beacon was placed, surrounded by these shimmering glass panes that stretched like a spider web from the midpoint to different directions. 3 of these colors I saw, the red, yellow, and green glass, headed to tunnels, but the 4th, blue one, was currently blocked off. Still, these were just half of the octagon's 8 sides, as jutted nooks filled the 4 other corners of the room. Briefly, I caught sight of the common backpack in one, as well as a trio of lights, which, if I was guessing, corresponded to the puzzles in the other 3. But before I could observe anything else, we landed on the ground of the first floor, and Caitlin instantly took charge. "Shane, go for the red path! Cassius, yellow! Macy, stay here and scout out the corners of the room! I'll take the green path, and then we'll all regroup," she yelled, and we suddenly scattered to follow her commands. Going down my chosen path, I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, and I began to sprint. My heart pounded as I raced down the yellow path, determined to make good on Caitlin's plan, and I crashed into the room. Once there, my eyes darted around, and I began to assess the nature of things. To my surprise, there looked to be 2 puzzles in the room. On both halves of the chamber, wires and cables were thrown everywhere, but one side was lined with 3 heavy levers and pistons, while the other seemed like a standard circuit board. Also, I noticed a big screen in the front of the room, and a sign that said physics. Coming with a hunch on what this all was for, I sprinted back for my report, knowing that there was no time to waste. When I returned, it only took a bit for the other 3 to join. Eager to start working on the puzzles, we quickly found ourselves all trying to explain our discoveries at once. However, our murmurs were conjoined, so Caitlin told us to speak in turns. Okay, we need to calm down," Caitlin started. "I'll explain my room first. I went through the green road, right? And it took me to the biology sector. But by the looks of it, we may all want to do this puzzle at once. From what I understood, it is a giant logic grid, and we have to find the clues around the room," she said, and Shane decided to speak next. "Nice. So I went to the chemistry place, and I saw these big cogwheels, which we'll have to turn. They're attached to some vats, you see, which are labeled with different amounts of liters. And according to the sign, we have to get 6 in the cider jug. But the wheels are very heavy and difficult to move," he said, and I nodded, figuring it would also take several people to solve. In fact, that seemed like a trend in all rooms. Yeah, I had a similar thing, I said. But instead of one puzzle for us all, there were two of them instead. If I would guess, one of us is supposed to solve the simple circuit on the left, while the other three deal with a piston puzzle on the right, as that one had these heavy levers too. Still, if I might add, I think it might make sense to have all of us there at once, for efficiency and in case we need it. Macy nodded, and for a second I wondered if she wouldn't want to talk, but she did meekly pipe up. That might make sense. I got the backpack and looked at the other nooks, she blushed, and they seem to hold smaller puzzles. One has 4 items and asks for some numbers. Another is a cipher of sorts, and the last has these A's, C's, G's, and T's in an odd pattern. It might make sense, though, that the bigger rooms take more people to solve, she said as she fidgeted. Well, then let's go to my room first, Caitlin spoke on behalf of us all. We should be there together, like you said, and it's probably going to take us a long time, so we might as well go through it now while we still have energy, she commanded, and we agreed to the plan, following her down the green path. I should say, though, the room's in a bit of a weird state, she mused as we began to jog. Like, it feels kind of alive, she said, and when we entered in the room, we saw exactly what she meant. The green room was quite strange. Various sounds played from speakers overhead that felt straight from the woods, and that wasn't even the natural part. In some sense, the room felt inhabited, as a weird slime had spread, not pausing at the workplaces, walls, or even diagrams. The rest of the room was just as weird too, as these lifelike creatures had wrapped themselves around experiments and test tubes, looking oddly possessed. It was bizarre, to say the least, and the first thing I thought of was how much it felt like sci-fi. Yeah, it's kinda strange, Caitlin said as she took in her shock. But the actual instructions are here. She showed us the lectern in the center of the room. I didn't see much, but from what I skimmed, we have to solve the logic grid and find the clues to do that first, she said, and while she was talking, I went over to read the book.
Many different organisms inhabit the Zarabaran lands. So many, in fact, that our scientists are always finding more. Recently, they found another 6, but unfortunately they mixed up their notes, and can't remember which species is which beyond some vague clues. While they're aware that each species has its own unique color, attribute, and weight, they don't recall which has each one, and have seemed to lose the clues to the error which scattered them in the biology sector. Find the 10 clues in answering machine, then input the correct color, weight, and attribute for each species to help the scientists.
AA. As I read, I picked up the meaning. Okay, so we do need to find the clues, like Caitlin said, so we should split up to look for them, I called, but pointed at the book in a brief pause. We need to know the weights, colors, attributes, and names for each of the species, so if we can find the answering machine, it should really help us. Shane grinned at me. Cool, so why don't you 3 look around the room, and I'll set up the logic grid. That way, we won't waste time later, he said, and as the 3 of us agreed, he grabbed a marker. There are 6 main boxes, right? As there are 4 categories that overlap, he murmured to himself, and so the rest of us dispersed around the room. While Caitlin and Macy checked the tables and equipment, I headed straight to the weird goo that was covering the walls. It had to be there for a reason, and so, feeling like no place should be unchecked, I stuck my left hand in. The substance was oddly cold, like I was reaching into ice cream, but it felt more sticky than that. I realized it was jelly, or some variant of sorts, and would likely work as a hiding place. So, while the first few pockets I searched turned out empty, I didn't give up till I found a clue inside the 4th. Pulling the thin slip of plastic out, I read, Clue 8. The Bonko Pop does not weigh 200 pounds, and called out to the group. Then, on Shane's suggestion, I threw the clue in the center of the room and started a pile. As the jelly was both vast and had got results so far, I then decided to hone in even more on my idea, and use a search method. According to the depth structure, it was sometimes better to check hotspots that were known to give results than search other areas, and with 2 girls covering the rest of the room, I chose to go all in. For the next few minutes, I bounced around the goopy sections of the room, managing to find 2 more clues, which, with the girls' help, brought our total to 7. As Shane finished setting up the grid, he helped me go through the final pockets too, and we managed to get another hint as well. Hey, since you are done with those, why don't you 2 start solving the puzzle, Caitlin proposed. Macy and I can continue to search the rest of the room, but we might as well use our head start to get ahead. We have 8 of the clues, after all, she said, and bent over a box while we agreed. Shane and I then took the pile of clues to the grid. "Alright, Cassius, we got this thing," he said, sprawling the slips on the gray slab of the whiteboard. "I'll raffle off these names to you, and you can write them in their categories," he stated, then cleared my confusion by calling out Limo Limo, Bonko Pop, and 400 pounds, right back to back. After telling him to slow down a bit so I could write, we found our rhythm. Out of all the clues we had, we managed to find 5 names, 4 colors, 5 weights, and all 6 of the attributes. However, we were still missing 4 labels on the grid, so I always figured it was best to leave them as variables. The missing name became X, the weight was Y, and after Macy gave us a 9th clue that had another color, the absent one was Z. 1 clue was still missing, but as everything else was ready to solve, we started to read the hints.
Clue 1. The Limo Limo, red animal, species that weighs 400 pounds, Bonko Pop, yellow creature, and winged organism are the 6 different specimens. Clue 2. The animal with fins is 4 times heavier than the Ivoralius. Clue 3. The horned creature weighs more than the one with flower arms. Clue 4. The germling is pink. Clue 5. Of the spiked animal and the Ivoralius, one is brown and the other is blue. Clue 6. Either the Trebuska or the finned animal weighs 100 pounds. Clue 8. The Bonko Pop does not weigh 200 pounds. Clue 9. Of the Bonko Pop and the germling, one is fur and the other weighs just 20 pounds. Clue 10. Between the horned creature and the 50-pound specimen, one is blue and the other is yellow.
With our 9 clues in front of us, Shane and I began to look for certainties, etching out the impossibilities or facts within the clues. Some of the things that were stated were implied, while others were evident, like how clue 4 meant both that the germling was pink and that no other animal was. After finding all the possible things to directly cut out, we turned to look at the direct comparisons, or the either-or clues. Their logic was as such. If 2 animals had to be either brown or blue, like in clue 5, both could be no other tint, and no other could be brown or blue themselves. With this, we made a bit of progress on the grid, and started to look at the less obvious comparisons, like that in clue 6. For this one, we didn't know which of the Trebuska or fin creature would weigh 100 pounds, but because they were phrased as separate species, the Trebuska could not have fins. As we continued to go on, however, I sensed a problem beginning to emerge. While it was easy to eliminate some colors and attributes, the weights were another story due to the math involved, and with us missing a number. Had we had all of the weights, we could have known for sure what to cut off, but when one was absent, a clue like number 3 didn't help us very much. Sure, the flowery creature was lighter than the ones with horns, but for all we knew, the absent number could be 1, 150, or even 1,000 pounds, which would make a huge difference for solving the grid. We decided that we had to ask the girls if they made some more progress. "Nope, we're still looking, but we did find a book," Caitlin said in response, and despite my confusion as to what this book was, I was a little bit annoyed. It was frustrating how we still hadn't found the one thing we needed, and at this point it was a waste of time. "Hold up," Caitlin said, "I might have an idea. Did the lectern say room or section?" she asked. And after I looked in the book and confirmed the latter, Caitlin darted into the hallway. "I'm hoping this will work," she yelled as she vanished from our sight. At this point, our grid was frozen, so we had nothing to do but wait till she came back. And luckily, when she did, she was holding the capsule, which had the 7th clue, and tossed it to me. "It was out of the hallway," she grumbled, "camouflaged with the ceiling. But at least we have it now." I nodded, looking at the oblong tube and turning it over to see the final variables. For the animal, the Semadod was left, as the color was green and the weight turned out to be 5 pounds. Additionally, clue 7 attached was with numbers, saying that the Semadod is lighter than the Ivoralius. As we wrote the missing pieces on the board, Caitlin and Macy approached to help us solve the rest of the puzzle. While we'd had a brief setback, I hoped that the added personnel would help pick us speed, and that this, surely, was not the point where we'd face negative returns. Chapter 11, Procedure. It turned out to be just fine. As Caitlin and Macy joined us at the board, Shane and I had already crossed out nearly half the logic grid, and the girls helped us complete the rest. There were a few snags that we hit along the way, but ultimately, the missing weight solved the puzzle, and we found the final answers quite quickly. The germling had pink fur and weighed 400 pounds, the Limo Limo had green fins and was 200, and so on and so forth for the rest of the puzzle.
Germling, pink. Fur, 400 pounds. Limo Limo, green. Fins, 200 pounds. Trebuska, yellow. Horns, 100 pounds. Ivoralius, blue. Wings, 50 pounds. Bonko Pop, brown. Spikes, 20 pounds. Semadod, red. Flower arms, 5 pounds.
Okay, I'll put in the answers now, I said once we'd finished the grid, as I fidgeted with the capsule in my hands. I yanked its top off, and my group was surprised to see a green shard of glass come out, but I figured it must have been for the beacon in the lab center. I was a bit taken aback. This was relatively soon to have 1/4 of the escape room solved, but if I had to guess, the other shards, and especially the blue one, would not be as easy to get. Alright, so where do we go next? Caitlin asked, as we figured that just standing still wasn't our best plan. Do we want to head to your section, Cassius? She asked, but I shook my head, thinking that another route was best. Let's go to Shane's, I said, and the black-haired boy grinned at me. It's better that we go to his first than mine, as it's a team-based puzzle, and we should only divide when we have to. At that, the rest of the group agreed, and so, slipping the green shard in our bag, Shane took us to the chemistry room. Alright, so my room has a jug puzzle, he said as we ran through the tunnels, but he elaborated when seeing both Macy and I confused. That means, essentially, that we have to turn these big cogwheels back and forth to get a set amount of liquid in one vat, he said, and I saw Caitlin nodding. Yeah, what Shane said is correct, Caitlin confirmed, and I recognized that I'd be taking a back foot on this challenge. I like how these puzzles test spatial awareness, since you have to work with the defined limits for each jug to solve the puzzle. It's quite clever, really, she said, and I took her word for it. Yeah, Shane said, as we entered the room and saw 3 humongous jugs. So, here are the 3 vats we need to use, and I saw that they fill up to 12, 9, and 7 liters respectively. Now, the 12 one is currently full, while the rest are empty, but by the time that we are done, we'll need to get 8 letters into the center vat over here, by using the cogwheels, he said, and I turned around to see 6 big bronze gears which were the size of beach balls. They are quite heavy, though, he warned. I nodded, but figured it was best to test them just in case, grimacing when I could barely make them budge. Okay, so will we need to pull all these, or what? I said. Like, how should we go about solving this puzzle? Macy, to my surprise, was the first to share an answer. Well, she shyly intervened, if it's so hard to push the gears, we could try to solve the puzzle before we have to do that, she said, lighting up with a faint blush. I noticed there's a blackboard in that corner of the room, and we could try to use that to optimize our plan. Shane scratched at his neck beard, but I could tell he wasn't loving her idea, though I didn't think it was that bad. I don't think that's horrible, but I'm wondering if we could do it faster. I'm just worried that we'll waste our time planning, and could end up falling behind the other teams, you know? That, and it's likely easier to visualize this puzzle, he said, and for as reluctant as I was, I had to concede he had some good points. We were, first and foremost, in a race against time. What do you think, Caitlin and Cassius? What should we do? For a second, I paused as my mind formed a shaky plan, but as Caitlin continued to hesitate, I knew it was best to just speak up. The truth was, I didn't think that either plan was bad, so I figured I could find a compromise. Well, I said, are we sure that it takes all 4 of us to move the gears? I mean, I know I can't do it on my own, but what if one of us was at the blackboard while the other 3 were here? That way, we'd both go faster and still make optimal progress. It took a second, but each of my teammates seemed to come around. Well, I see no harm in trying it, Caitlin told me, and the other 2 nodded. So, who should be at the blackboard? She asked, though I read behind her words to tell she wanted to. And, to my surprise, Shane directly led her. Well, you'd probably be the fastest of us, so why don't you do it? He asked as she beamed, then practically bounced to the blackboard. I looked at Shane to see if he was sad, but he just shrugged at me. We did the last puzzle, so let's see if we 3 are enough to push the gears, he said, and walked us to the long steel pipes where the gears resided. So, how do you think that we should start? Caitlin thought for a second, but then decided it was best to fill the center vat by moving 9 liters, and Shane nodded in response. He took us to the pipe with the corresponding wheel, and then, on the count of 3, we pushed. While the gear was heavy, it managed to turn this time with our 3 efforts, and after 10 tedious seconds, it moved enough for the liquid to start flowing. Well, it seems this is working, Shane said with a light grin, though he's already rubbing his hands as we watched the jug fill up. I might be sore later on, though, he said, and I exhaled with a snort. After 20 more seconds, the transfer was done, and we went to close back up the valve so we didn't impede our progress. Thankfully, it was easier to switch the jugs off than on, and we were soon able to tell Caitlin that we were ready for round 2. Okay, so you're gonna want to break up your 9 liters now. So pour 7 of them into the right vat, she said, and we trusted her logic enough to follow her commands. With another mighty heave, the 3 of us pushed forth the gear again, and 7 liters of liquid began to flow in the right vat. Nice, so now, after you're done, let's add those 7 liters to the 3. A few minutes later, due to Caitlin's leadership, the puzzle began to fall into place. In just 7 turns, we had gotten to a combination of 1, 4, and 7 liters in the 3 jugs respectively, and now it would reach a clear enough pathway for Caitlin to help us with the gears. Together, we poured the 7 liters into the lone one, then drained the 4 to the right jug, and finished up by pouring the 8 in the middle. As the last of the liters flowed in the center jug, Shane hit the end button, and a robotic voice took hold. "Scanning," it said, and processed our results before marking the puzzle complete. As a rustic tray lifted out of the floor, I took the red glass shard on it and slipped it in my bag. Then, congratulating Caitlin for doing so well and solving the puzzle, we all went back through the main hub into the physics chamber. Alright, so in this room, there are 2 sides, I said, leading my group to my room, and they correspond to 2 separate puzzles. On the left, there seems to be the circuit board, which has different amounts of volts and ohms, but on the right, there is a 3-person puzzle with some heavy pistons and levers. Now, I figured it was best that we split up the work while here, so I'm free to go with the team, but who wants to work solo? Immediately, Macy offered herself in a meek voice. I can do it, she said, as she scratched a scar on her left arm. I mean, unless anyone else wants, she said, as she then looked down at the floor before speaking again. I figured that you'll probably have to communicate a lot and move these things, and I won't be good at that, she said. And though both Caitlin and Shane looked like they wanted to go solo as well, we settled for a plan. There didn't seem to be a need for arguing. So, as Caitlin, Shane, and I worked on our group puzzle, we quickly made progress, and we found it quite easy. This made some sense. The escape room thus far had been a test of compromise and logic, and the 3 of us had already established some sort of precedent. Shane was content to be
but energetic
voice inside the group, and I trusted Caitlin's forward thinking while she trusted me to do most of the complex puzzle solving. Perhaps it was too soon to call any of us friends, and I wasn't sure how much Shane and Caitlin got along, but there did seem to be some mutual respect, and we managed to solve the puzzle with just a few faults. Okay, I said, as we pushed the last piston in place and saw 2 numbers light up to cover half of the TV. It looks like we'll need your answer to finish the puzzle, but our half of the puzzle should be done. Are you good to finish this one on your own, Macy, while we do the ones in the middle? I asked, and she gave an affirmative response from where she was writing. Yeah, but it might be good if someone takes the bag, she called, and Caitlin went to grab it from her. I should be done in a few minutes, so I'll catch up with you 3 then, she said, and we took the cue to go back to the center and look at the nooks. Once we arrived, we agreed that it was best to solve each puzzle individually at first, then go on to help the other ones once we were done with ours. I was unsure of which puzzle I should do, but Shane wanted the cryptogram while Caitlin took the numbered one, so I was left with the odd letter sequence Macy had pointed out before. As I looked at the sign on the wall and took in the letters ATGCGGTATGCATGGACGGGTGT, I realized that I knew what it was. A DNA sequence I had to make into
Chapter
codons.
12. Ingenuity. As I remembered, there are 3 main steps in transforming a DNA sequence into codons. Transcription, translation, and the actual transformance itself, which would take 3 nucleotides in a row and decrypt them based on a codon chart. From freshman biology, I also recalled some neat tricks for the process, like how transcription and translation undid each other, save for simply replacing uracil with thymine. But to solve the actual puzzle, I knew there had to be some information given, and thinking back to the book Macy had earlier, I knew that was the instruction manual. Okay, I muttered to myself as I flipped through the book, looking for the codon chart I needed to finish the code. So far, I'd done the first 2 steps and morphed the code into
AUG, CGG, UAU, GCA, UAG, ECJC, GGG, UGU.
but I never memorized a chart to my detriment today. As I found the right page though, I did remember what to do. First, I had to find the large matching letter in the codon's circled center, then continue to branch out until I had the exact code. Reading the book, I decided it was best to write down the abbreviations of each of the codons, and noted me, R, T, A, L, and then something that said stop for the first 5 nucleotide groups. For a second, I was confused at what happened, But then I checked the information on the page and realized this was natural. Shrugging, I figured I had the answers I needed and went to the answering machine. As I turned the power on, the computer met me with a screen that showed 3 different puzzles, and I clicked on the one that said codons. When I did, I was greeted with full words like adenine and thymine, as well as a blank row at the bottom of the screen. Matching my shorthands to the longer codon names, I dragged each answer down before it said to stop, then input my final code and looked at the confirmation lamps. After waiting for 5 seconds in anticipation, a loud ding notified me I was right, and the first light bulb turned on. "Oh, good job, Cassius!" Shane cheered, and I turned to see him watching me. Nodding, I watched him go back to his puzzle, but then noticed that the room was strangely vacant. Besides Shane and myself, no one else was here, and while that made sense for Macy, I had to ask Shane where Caitlin went. "Oh, Caitlin's number lock required her to go traverse the 3 sections," he said, "so we're here by ourselves. I wouldn't worry about it, but since you finished your puzzle, would you want to help me out?" he asked, and I hummed, guessing it was better than just standing around. "Alright," I said, then squinted as I looked at his page. "So, what do you have here? I heard this was a cryptogram, but I must say, I don't really get your notes." Shane just laughed in response. "Yeah, I had a feeling you'd say that." He grinned, as if he could just write
12IE56I16
and not be asked questions. "But you're right, it is a cryptogram, and the only problem with that is that it's way too long of one. I spent 2 whole minutes just trying to get these letters, so I'm trying to see if brute force would be faster," he said, and I didn't really know what to think of that. Okay, I frowned as I looked back at his notebook. I don't necessarily hate that idea, but how would we do that? I mean, I see that the instructions say we just need to find one word with the capital letters, but couldn't that be anything? I asked, and Shane grinned in response. "Well, you'd think that," he said, "but then I thought some more, and I realized that everything in this lab is a theme. You see, each of these rooms connected back to their namesake, with the physics room having 2 circuit puzzles, the biology room having 1 on animals, and the chemistry room dealing with transferring liquids. Now, it's not like they're perfect examples, but your puzzle also fits the theme, and so I have to think this one does too. But the only problem is, I don't know what to guess," he said, scratching his chin in thought, which I noticed was a common tic of his. "I mean, I've already tried the room names, and even something like experiment wouldn't fit quite right, so I don't know what it'd be." His face scrunched in a frown, and I looked at the page again. His idea was wacky, but I was willing to try it. Looking at the code for a few seconds, then I found nothing, but suddenly it all snapped into place. I worked in algorithms, so I could recognize patterns, and I eventually realized
12IE56I16
happened to be a 10-letter code with just enough letters in the right places to maybe actually fit one word on the theme. "It's scientist," I said, and watched as the word settled in the air. "Your word is scientist, 'cause see, the S and the T fit, and it seems like you're correct about the theme." Shane's whole face lit right up. "You're right! By the mages, you're right, Cassius!" he yelled, and somehow Macy chose the exact wrong moment to walk in the room, as she was forced to duck and cover her ears. Ignoring this, Shane whooped and ran to the machine, typing in the letters frantically and then waiting for the second lamp to light. It did, to my continued surprise, as it meant that our brute force method has actually worked. "Woo!" Shane cheered, and I realized I had to give him credit. I would never have thought to do something like that by myself. Now, though, 2 of the central puzzles were done, and with the yellow shard of glass in Macy's hand, things were certainly looking up. We had little left to do but wait for Caitlin to finish the puzzle that she had, but soon enough she was done too, lighting the 3rd lamp and activating alarm. Boom! The door in front of us crashed down, granting us entrance to the blue tunnel and one final puzzle. Together, Caitlin, Shane, Macy, and I ran through the walkway, past the windows with lava behind them, and to the sign that announced testing room. If that wasn't ominous enough, we ignored the sign that said last chance to turn back, and upon entering, came face to face with a fictional monster made out of gears, wires, and goo. Surrounded by 3 wooden triangles, which were 10 feet away, he towered over the rest of the room, and was likely the reason why the lab felt so alive. But somehow, I still didn't get the memo.
"Welcome, contestants!"
a gravelly voice said, and I jumped back in surprise as the monster reared his head and laughed.
"Yes! Welcome to my lair! Now that you are here, only one of us can leave, so I hope you are ready!"
he said, and the door behind us crashed down to lock us in the room. It was good I wasn't claustrophobic. The monster gave us an evil grin.
"Now that I've set the terms, I'd like to offer a challenge!"
he said, and I snapped my attention back to the sound box.
Solve my puzzle, and I'll let you escape with your precious blue shard of glass. But fail, and I'll lock you here forever, or at least until your timer runs out. So I'd pay attention if I was you, for this is your puzzle.
The monster cackled once again as his voice shifted to that of the prince.
Competitors, you must help free the lab. Inside the monster's lair, there are 3 number pyramids, which each have the letters from A to J to match the digits from 0 to 9 shuffled. Think of it like this. Each letter replaces a number, and your goal is to translate all of the letters into numbers, then solve the rest of the triangles, where each box is the sum of the 2 below. Only after all 3 of the pyramids are fully correct will the beast allow you to escape,
the prince instructed before his voice went to static, then the monster's vicious growl.
Good luck, competitors! You'll need it to escape my den!
The monster reared back in place after he finished talking, but it still took the 4 of us a few seconds to think back on what he said and realize we had a puzzle to solve. Luckily, the prince had expected this, as he was nice enough to give us a transcript of the speech, plus a clue that said,
all of the variables are constant between the 3 pyramids.
So, with all the information we needed, we went to look at what the pyramid said, following Caitlin's advice to copy all the letters down. There is a diagram here. I can't really speak to this one. The hardest part of the puzzle was knowing how to start. Indeed, a whole 2 minutes passed where the 4 of us just stared at the letters and tried to comprehend the hidden code within. For sure, we threw out some theories, like how Macy said, "This GD block seems to be the same in every pyramid," or how Caitlin thought that both A and B must be multiples of 9. But while both cases turned out to be true, they did a little help. In fact, they didn't even change the grid. "We need something more definite," I said, seeing how our notebook was filled with meaningless scrawls that were only confusing. "'Cause all of this doesn't help without more information. But how can we find a solid number in this grid?" I asked, but received no answer. This challenge was both simple, yet frustratingly hard to understand. But just like how some puzzles are easier to solve after a break, all we needed here was a change in perspective, and my comment had set off something in Shane. "Wait, I think I've got it," he said after some seconds, and we all whirled on him. "Well, not it, but I at least have something. H has to be 0, you see, because the end numbers in the second pyramid stay the same. I don't know how to explain, but look, GD plus AH equals ED, so H must be 0. "Wow," I said, as my mind wrapped around his thought process. Shane was completely right, and I thanked the mages once again for his outside-the-box mindset. We now had something to go off, and that made a huge difference when solving a puzzle like this. That's good, but now what do we do? We have 1 letter, right? So we have to look for other places where this H could be, I said, and we were able to carry it somewhere. GD minus FD would end with a 0, and since it was the sum of A plus C, both 1-digit numbers, it had to equal 10. But what did that actually mean to us? We were stumped once again, and that was when I realized there were multiple hurdles to this puzzle. But this time, we refused to be stumped. We did have some knowledge, which let us look for the kind of tricks the prince would try pulling. And this time, after just 30 seconds, Macy saw the next one. "Wait, I see it, guys! It's all about orders," she said, with a grin on her lips, "and not about the math. Look, we use that GD and ED thing to get H at 0, but it also means E is bigger than G. In fact, if we apply that further, we can also see that E is bigger than A, which is bigger than G, which is bigger than F, and don't you get it, everyone?" She collapsed in hysterics, so full of abstract truth that it was bursting out of her. But we still weren't done with the puzzle just yet. "Well, you're right, Macy," Caitlin stated, "but that won't give us all 10 of the numbers. I mean, it helps us know a bit," she said and wrote out,
E is greater than A, which is greater than C, which is greater than G, which is question mark over B, which is greater than F, which is greater than H.
"But that's the furthest the chain goes," she said, and suddenly it seemed like we were stuck for a 3rd time. At least, that's what I thought until I remembered a point we had made earlier. "But wait, Caitlin, remember, A plus C equals 10, so we do have enough. Look, we know that no letters repeat, which means the highest combination adding to 10 is 4 plus 6. And looking at it here, it has to be that way. See, we'd have H as 0, F as 1, B and G as 2 and 3, and C, which must be 4. I mean, I have no clue if this all makes sense, but don't you see, it works." Caitlin mulled it over before nodding as well. "And that's enough to solve," she confirmed with a hum, and we grinned in triumph. With nearly half of the values, we could easily plug the information and use math to solve the rest of the puzzle. Translating the rest of the letters as we went, we were able to fill in the 3 pyramids on our paper. And again, there's another diagram that I'm not repeating here. Then, with the puzzle complete, we simply had to rearrange the numbers onto the boards and hit the final button, which, while time-consuming, was easy enough. As Shane collapsed on the button again, a laser suddenly shot out from each pyramid, straight to the chest of the monster, and the beast keeled before dispensing our blue shard of glass. With it in her hands, Caitlin led the charge back to the center. We were glad to see our beacon still unlit. We were only the 11th team to go, but at least we hadn't failed as of yet. With that much known, we dug into our bag and took out the other shards, placing them one by one in the center of the room. Of course, it took an arbitrary 5 seconds for our beacon to light up, but sure enough, it did, with a bright, dazzling green. "Congratulations, everyone, and great job to us all," I said aloud as we rode the high of what was at least a temporary win, though I knew we all questioned whether it was enough. Surely it was, I told myself time and time again, but even through the coming days, we wouldn't know. Still, as I saw the other 3 stacking their hands up as our elevator dropped down, I reckoned I should join in a chant. "Green team on 3!" Shane yelled as we stepped in the elevator and back to the real world. 1, 2, 3, green team! We all yelled and raised our hands up in the air.